Good afternoon, this is Oxinity channel on education. If we are proud of something here at Oxinity is that in general all our teachers have a very positive comments, feedback from students. Our students are very happy, they explicitly say so. But if there is one comment that is kind of a recurrent every now and then, is one about error correction. So we can hear sometimes my teacher is not correcting me, or is not correcting me enough, or is not correcting me as I expect. So today we're going to devote our talk to discuss, to see what types of errors are there. Are we correcting in the right moment, or when and what to correct exactly? So we have here Rob Wiley and Carlos Funk in Barcelona and Graham Bell from Malaga. And
Hi.
I would like to encourage all of you to bring your comments and questions and experiences, because we would want to learn from your experiences in general. So let's start the talk with the students' perceptions, because if we're going to talk about my teacher is not correcting me, it's because the students sometimes have the feeling that they're not being corrected or not being corrected all the time. So why are some students feeling that they're not being corrected from your experience, guys?
Well, from my experience, usually what happens is that they'll come and say, "Hey, is this correct? Is this right?" They're asking while they're speaking. They're asking me, "Have they chosen the right word?" However, what I just do is I let them speak. I let them form their sentences and stories, and then I go back and correct each one. No, they unfortunately they expect sometimes that you correct them every 100% of the time, but that's not really what we want to intend, because we want to let them the stories flow. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's about finding the balance, right?
Yeah.
You will have certain students who maybe they do expect or want to be corrected every single thing, but depending on the quantity of mistakes and errors being made in a sentence, then it's very difficult or impossible to do that.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's too much, but
It's too much. It's otherwise there'll be an information overload.
Yeah, exactly. Graham, what is your experience in this regard?
I mean, sometimes it's a case of art, depending on the level of the student. Sometimes they can make so many mistakes that you don't know which one to go with, or errors. Sometimes, like what Carlos just said, it's about not breaking their flow. It's hard. It's hard to know where and when to. I mean, I think it's really important to work that out with your student, what they actually want.
Yeah, because I guess certain students want different things as well, right?
Okay.
Yep.
So
And what depending, you said something right, Graham. Depending on the level, if it's a P2, a beginner, then you do a more correction. If it's a P5 or an advanced level, then you do it more vocabulary and changes of words. Versus correcting. So it depends on the level of the student.
I mean, well, the quantity of errors being made though would be very different as well, right? Sort of a very advanced student. I've got certain students who make very few mistakes anyway, so I correct every single mistake during an hour class because they're so few and far between that actually I correct every single tiny little thing that they may say wrong. On the other hand, maybe a beginner would make, obviously he's going to make a lot more mistakes, so you have to then be selective with the ones that you choose to correct.
And do you guys
You've got to choose your battles.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, Rebecca.
No, do you ask your students how they would like to be corrected?
I do.
You do.
Well, I just think that with some students, you have to discover what their motivation is for learning English. And if, bottom line, a beginner, then you're just correcting as you seem fit because you know what you've got to get them to. But when they get to that kind of P3 or B2 level, they should have most of the basic functions in there, express themselves, obviously for most points. And then it's just working with what they need to take it forward. That's how I work.
Yeah. It's good that you mentioned the B2 level, the P3 for us, because that maybe is the level that I find most difficult to correct often, because you've got a high advanced level, so like I said, not many mistakes, correct everything. A beginner, they're only just making very simple sentences, whereas I find this intermediate level, right, they can make sentences, they can make arguments, so they want to be speaking as much as possible, but they maybe sometimes forget about sentence structure and just want to throw as much at you as you can, and it's really hard to then, like Graham said, choose which things to correct, which ones not to. So that intermediate level, for me personally, I find the most difficult. I've got specific groups where I'm like, okay, that was, I know what you mean, but what now am I going to correct? Do I correct the pronunciation, or sentence structure?
Yeah, when it comes to when how does your student want to be corrected, it comes down to your feeling with your student. No, if they're speaking and they are having conversation and thoughts, and they're having an argument, then you don't want to cut their argument just to fix one word. You let them finish.
Yes.
You let them finish and then you come back.
I understand that, and yet there are students that want to be in total control of their production, and I think that's the very essence of the problem, that they want to be in control, know exactly what's going on, and also know that you are on top of what they are saying. So you're also attentive to their production up to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And that's why whenever they say my teacher is not correcting me, that's what they think. So I think that the answer sometimes has to entail a little bit of explanation. Yes, I know what is going on here, but I'm selective. I am working little by little on the correctness.
Yeah. I guess with rapport, right? The more you know your students, and
Exactly.
the more they know you, then the
Yeah,
more you've got this
exactly.
understanding. And okay, we're not going to focus on that today, but next week, if
Exactly.
and when you make the same mistake,
Yeah.
then we'll work on it then. The later stage.
Right, and if you phrase it like that, I usually, what I say is, I notice that you keep doing this mistake consistently,
Exactly.
and today we need to address it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Then they know that you have been paying attention
Yeah.
to previous
Yeah,
instances.
because it's not the same an old mistake than a new one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
old
Yeah,
mistakes
yeah.
require more attention. I
Yeah.
guess.
And then, like you say, they know that you've been listening in the previous classes, and think, okay, so he has been aware of it, and now today is the day.
Yeah.
We're gonna focus on correcting it.
I guess
I think
when
it was-
you guys,
sorry.
Graham, please.
No. I was going to, like when I mentioned earlier, picking your battles depends on the activity that you're teaching as well.
Yeah.
Like my biggest problem with correction come from topic activities, because it's a free for all. I don't know what's coming at me. But with vocabulary activities, the only thing I'm really concentrating on correcting is them using that pragmatically. And with a structure activity, it's their form of the structure. Everything else, I'm kind of like, will I do it now? Or will I just concentrate on what I'm actually teaching? I think that helps me a lot. But the topic ones, that's the real tricky one.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but from your experience, are all the mistakes the same? I mean, yes, there are mistakes that we can talk about slips of the tongue. Maybe we even ignore those. Or, but then what's the difference between a mistake and an error? That's, I think, important that teachers know.
Well, they're synonymous. I mean, they do mean the same thing. The error really is something that they haven't been taught before. Whereas a mistake is something, they should know this. Why, and those are the ones that I guess then you have to decide in the time and place that you are in activity whether this is something that's important. Because if it's an error and they just don't have it, then you might want to have a whole bunch of material behind you to actually teach this, rather than tackle it on your own with nothing. Because then you start slipping into grammar translation and having a lack of materials to teach properly,
Okay, so let's say that mistakes are those things that the students pronounce wrongly after they've been taught once or
They've
several
been
times.
taught it, right? But and then which I'm sure we'll talk about later, it comes in terms of how to correct a student. Could maybe correct them. Self-correction for a mistake would be possible,
Exactly.
whereas for an error, it wouldn't.
Exactly.
And you want to wait for the self-correction. That's what I tend to do. As I wait, if they know they've done it and they said it incorrectly, and then they say it again, and they say it correctly, then I don't correct that, because I know that they have it. They just haven't. They made an error. They made a mistake.
Yep.
So I let that go. But if it's repeated repetitively, then yes, I will
Okay.
correct it.
All right. Okay, so in an attempt, students often in an attempt to say something in English, they take the Spanish word in this case and make it sound like English. And okay, so we know that that is interlanguage, right, Graham? So
Yeah.
what should our attitude to interlanguage be?
I'm just happy they're giving. To be honest, I do speak Spanish. I stick an O on a word and best 50% of the time, right? I know. I guess it depends on the level again. If I'm working on a structure activity and to get their flow of using the structure, they don't know the word and they just have a stab at it. I don't want to discourage it because it's a process. It's part of the process of learning a language is that little transference between their mother tongue and their L2.
Yeah.
But it is something you have to deal with. But I don't entirely discourage it. For me, it's a stepping stone. I guess it depends on the level of the student.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, sometimes I do encourage students to maybe have a little bit of a stab in the dark, because with the cognates, then it can actually work sometimes, and exactly the same as Graham.
Yeah.
I kind of do it a little bit in Spanish as well, so, but no, sometimes, they do
No,
take, and it doesn't work out.
and don't forget, 30% of English is Spanish, basically Spanish words. So
Yeah.
it's gonna happen, and I just let that go.
Yeah.
Correct it if I need to, but let it go.
So, for instance, if we have a group of students, that's funny, but if you have in the same group a French speaker and a Spanish speaker, maybe they can understand each other better using interlanguage. But in any case, can you guys foresee some mistakes? So, can you kind of, depending on the level, say, I know that here probably, or it's very likely that you say whatever incorrectly.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
I mean, learning Spanish, obviously, Carlos, you've got Spanish, like knowing Spanish and having learned my Spanish, improving every day, I can predict mistakes that students are gonna make through because of experience of teaching and having an understanding of the Spanish language. So it does help me sometimes. I will ask a question to on purposely trick the student, because I'll be to try and catch them out, because I can kind of expect what they're going to answer,
Yeah.
and then use that to correct, or if they get it right, perfect. But it's then spend time dedicating to correcting that. So I think that's helped a little bit. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you find the same, no, with
Yeah,
having Spanish.
I do. And I can predict what they're gonna say.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
And then you can kind of sympathize and understand where they're coming from. You can be
Yeah.
like, okay, I understand why you've said that, and I completely get it. But this is
But in a lot of comes from what level they're in. If they're basic level, they're gonna be do that. Intermediate levels, though, I tend to be more strict, more hard when it comes to that,
Okay.
because I said, well, you know the word and you know to use it, but you are you're going back, you're not thinking. So I make an effort to.
Actually, I was going to ask you about your attitude because what type of teachers are you? Are you strict or more laid back?
I think I'm quite laid back personally. I think not strict in. No, I'm laid back. I think maybe I can be quite strict when need to be, and strict with certain corrections. But I wouldn't describe myself as a strict.
I'm laid back. I think I'm laid back, but there are moments. Depends on what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
There are moments where I can tend to be more strict based on what they're trying to do. If somebody has a presentation to do,
Oh yeah.
Then
You
you're going to be
Yeah.
more strict.
I'm gonna be really strict because
Yeah.
I need to make sure that they present correctly and not make any mistakes. So it depends on the situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been doing a bit of that as public speaking with people, and that's like the one. This needs to be bang on,
Yeah.
or you're going to sound really bad.
Yeah.
And I think like when it comes to edit, for me, when it comes to edit correct, pretty not loose with grammar. I'm not so strong in enforcing as long as it's comprehensible, depending on the level. But pronunciation, I'm really strict on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I believe they've got to get that from day one. That's like my belief as a teacher.
So obviously we have teachers with different purposes and goals, and some of them are learning just and enjoying the experience for the fun, and okay, they see how they progress class after class. Some, though, have a different attitude. They are busy people and need English for work-related purposes. Therefore, they want to make the most of the class. Those students are really, really requesting that the teachers are more strict on their production.
Yeah.
So, do you have that in mind usually?
I think you can tell, right, when you meet a student for the first time, you can, like Graham said, ask kind of what they want to get from the class, but I think you can tell the students pretty quickly, the ones that want you to be a lot more strict with correction, and the other ones that maybe don't want you to be as strict. And I think you can kind of work that out pretty quickly when being in the classroom.
I think you know the student has to do the work before the class, and the ones that comes with a piece of paper with all the words written and prepared and done, versus the one that hasn't done anything. So it depends on, if the one that hasn't done the work, then I, work harder for them. More strict. But if the one who hasn't done any work, then they're more laid back.
Okay.
Yeah, you can assess your students. They want their English to be on whether they're prepared for their class or not.
Yeah.
Which
it's
it's about how motivated they are in that situation, and if they've spent time looking over the material beforehand and preparing.
And you'll be surprised. That a lot of people who actually do stay 10 minutes or 20 minutes and they do the work. And those are the ones that you can see right away that you need to.
Having said that, it wouldn't personally make a difference to me whether a person has done or not, because they may
No,
not have
me
had time beforehand. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be
that's a good point.
correcting as much just because they haven't had time to prepare.
Agree.
a
And I
class
think
beforehand.
that's an interesting point, because time of their day being like, that's the one thing that I had with a student most of the time when I teach them, is try and get an essence of what their day's been like, because if they've had a horrifically busy day, then I really need to reel back my error correction, because otherwise, either I'm going to annoy them, or they might just be making mistakes because they're tired. You know what I mean? The differences on what you attack that day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually, people don't complain about being overcorrected, and I know that sometimes the teachers wonder about the right balance. I think we have comments related to the right balance. But from my personal point of view, we've never had students complaining about being overcorrected. What about you guys? Have you had cases of students like, don't correct me so much, or?
No.
No.
I've had students complain that I'm correcting them at all. Which is, but no, I've never had a student. No.
I had students tell me, don't correct me, or not, don't give me time to make up, because I'm ready to jump in with a correction, and they actually tell me, don't. Let me think this through.
Okay.
And you should. When that happens, I'm actually very happy, because I'm like, yes, they're working it out in their own head, so I don't have to step in.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't, not that I've never had anyone say I've corrected too much.
Nobody says stop. Nobody ever tells
Well,
you.
no, because if no,
It happened.
I think
you're going jumping in too fast. That's why.
Maybe I'm just going in whack.
Just be a bit more relaxed.
No, but
You're too on the ball. That's what it is.
I actually had students tell me stop. Like, okay, I'm gonna stop back.
All right. No,
No, because
that means that they're self-conscious about their production, so they're kind of it's a kind of a control.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think we have some comments.
Yeah, we're talking about the balance that you just mentioned. So Maria, we got a comment from Maria. So she says there are two things about correction. If you correct too much, then the student becomes afraid and a bit self-conscious of speaking in English. Then if you don't correct enough, the student repeats the same mistakes and when corrected, ignores them. So she says you need to find the perfect balance and prioritize the important mistakes.
Why do you guys that happens, that you correct, but it seems as though your corrections were ignored? Do we students do that, actually?
I'm sorry, say what?
Sorry, I was really sorry.
That you explain something to a student and they say yes, and 10 minutes later they make the same mistake.
The yes is the problem.
Yeah.
I've had this happen. You correct them and they go, yes, And I go, no. You tell me it again.
Yeah, that's
Oh, yes. No, you.
that type of student I've had before as well. And it's like, yeah, I'm not interested, but I'm going to carry on. Yeah, I mean, it happens. But then I guess it's about, as well, about, like we said before, about knowing your students, right? So I know certain
Yeah.
students of mine that if I try to start talking about, I don't know, sentence structure, they're not going to be too bothered. They just, and I know what kind of thing I need to focus on with each specific student. I've got certain students who for some reason think pronunciation is not important at all, and they will go, yeah, so long as you understand, it doesn't matter if I'm pronouncing the ed at the end of a wrong. It's like, if I say play it, well, you understand what I mean, and
Yeah.
True.
so obviously you're still correcting, but I know there's certain, it's just about knowing your students.
Graham
I guess.
mentioned that Graham, for you, pronunciation is probably correction number one, right? You
Yeah.
correct pronunciation. What is the order of priorities that you have? I understand.
For me,
that-
okay. When I say pronunciation is number, there's just ones that I'm super keen on, and pronunciation and pragmatic use of something. If someone takes something and doesn't use it properly, like you can take a ton of structures and a ton of words and not use them right, so so someone doesn't understand you. A lot of feedback I've had from students is they've gone to the UK and no one's understood them, and it's because of their pronunciation.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
for me, like what I think what Kevin was talking about last week was that it's a muscle memory. So if you don't work on your pronunciation from the start and learn all these new sounds, like I have to do in Spanish, I'm not going to get any good at it. You have to practice them from day one. Some people think that pronunciation is for higher levels. For me, it's the other way around. It's
Yeah.
for lower levels because they've got to learn it from day one. But that's why it's important to me. Grammar, like what Kevin said last week. I mean, how many times have you heard a British person use grammar incorrectly?
Yeah.
So that's why that kind of slips a little for me. But each teacher is independent. It depends on your student as well.
Okay, Rob, do we have some comments?
Yeah, Mark has asked, do we have a different approach in a one-to-one class in terms of correction compared to a large group?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
For me, you got to be classroom dynamic. I think me and Mark, I think we talked about this before, about if you're in a room and you're a company and it's the owner, the secretary, and the IT department, then there's going to be some power games going on there. So you've really got to be careful how you balance that group. So I guess that, and sometimes people don't know each other either. You're doing an online class of someone from País Vasco, someone from Catalonia, and these people don't know each other or nervous to speak to each other. So there's those things that you've got to be careful. And for me, there's no right or wrong answer.
But on the other hand, we can have some peer corrections that we don't have with one-to-one classes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes
true.
the group helps actually correct
Yeah.
the...
Yeah. I think it depends on the class dynamic a
Yeah.
lot with that. Sometimes I've had it where I've had sort of the boss or the owner of a company and then the employees, let's say, and maybe the employees are a bit nervous or worried about correcting the boss, and so a lot of it depends on it's happened before though, it depends a lot on the dynamic, that they've got, especially if the boss has got weaker English than maybe the other people. Sometimes they're a bit scared to correct because they don't want to be correcting the boss, What about, I have another question from Julie, just quickly. She says, how do you correct a student diplomatically? So how do you deal with correcting a student who thinks they know everything? I think we've all had students like that, maybe.
Okay. All right. So that question, in order to answer it, maybe we should revise the different techniques of corrections, because then Julie will find her technique for this type of student. So when students say, my teacher is not correcting me, I guess they mean they're not correcting me explicitly on the spot. But yes, that's one type of corrections, but we have many others. So can we
peer correction, like you
peer correction?
said.
Okay.
Yeah. Self-correction, I mentioned before.
Okay.
The most important one, self-correction. If people type themselves often.
Yes, you have to
key
give.
component.
You know, you have to give them time to correct themselves because
Yeah.
you usually know.
Yeah.
Usually.
Just a look. You can just look
Yeah.
at the students, like we've all got this teacher look, maybe that we do, that we're not going to do on camera, but like we kind of look at that one that Graham's just
the
done.
side eye.
It's
look.
like the eye.
Like that's not.
Yeah, and it's that exact face that Graham's just done, and it's like, and then, but then they, you know, it's really effective because they think, okay, somewhere in this sentence I've made a mistake,
Yeah.
and it encourages them self-correction. I like that one.
I also think about perhaps not correcting, but using a different word, a synonym word, instead of And so I say, well, this works, but try a different word, because usually they know that vocabulary, they just haven't thought of it, putting it in that context.
Right.
So I do that a lot too.
Okay, so another way is, I guess, to rephrase the wrong
Yes,
sentence.
rephrase, yes.
Maybe
Or say like, she went, or
exactly
or
asking
they,
a
you know,
question
and-
about
yeah.
what was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. So we call that clarification request. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to. All right. And what else is there? So how can we correct diplomatically apart from these?
I like the list.
well-
Sorry, I like like getting them to say it again with a trigger, you know, and you can mix that with the rephrasing as well. Oh, so that's and then get them to say it again, and hopefully the second time they think about it, it comes out better. Then that way you can work out if it was a slip of a tongue or not.
Yeah.
I like doing that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, diplomatically it means different things for different people. You know, but I think we are all diplomatic when we are working with our students. I sure hope so.
Of course.
Well, I have the most. I work in a very situation. My partner, because I have to correct her English, and she says to me, I want you to correct me all the time. And I think I've said this before, that can lead to some difficult situations. But I manage to correct her all the time without her noticing. And I think that's the thing about being politically correcting someone, like doing it diplomatically, is doing it without them noticing. And working on these techniques to be. So you can say to a student, I've been correcting you all through this class and you didn't notice. And then showing them where and when, if you want to defend yourself,
Then we have an example that we always mention whenever we talk about corrections. And this is Matt Hammond and his notebook, which you, Graham, are a fan of. So can you explain about Matt's book? What type of correction is that?
It's delayed error correction in the book. Matt, every time we've got a TEFL course in Madrid and a student does a teaching practice with Matt, they come back and tell me, Matt's got this little book, and it's brilliant. He just sits and takes notes of everything, and at the end of the class, goes back over with it. It's basic, but it's so effective. And he's allowed students, like what Carlos was saying, to get in their flow, let them self-correct. And obviously, if they don't do it by the end of then you have a note of what they've done, and then you can correct them at the end. And they'll definitely feel like they've been corrected if you've got a list of their mistakes. It solves the problem.
I strongly recommend that technique for fluency activities, so for topic activities.
Because you, like Carlos said, you don't want to be interrupting, right? So just jotting down a few bits and pieces as you go along and doing the correction, which lots of people have mentioned anyway about. Comments about that. No, I was just saying they've said exactly that about depending on the type of what you're focusing on is depending whether it's on the spot correction or correcting at the end.
Yep.
At the end of a class.
So let's break down per concepts and categories briefly what to correct and when to correct. So for instance, pronunciation. Do we correct pronunciation on the spot? Or
if it's a pronunciation activity, then yes.
Yes. Okay.
I was going to say if it was part of if it was a fluency, then no.
No. Okay. So correcting vocabulary appropriacy. When do we correct that?
At the end of the sentence.
At the end of the sentence.
At the end of the sentence. I usually that's when I do it. Okay, the end sentence. If I don't like that word, then I will redo that. Ask him to ask for a synonym or a new word.
Okay. Perfect. Grammar accuracy.
I'd rephrase it.
Rephrase it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, rephrase it with them. So was that what you guys?
Yeah. Or if they've already done it a couple of times, then that look we were just talking about, if we're doing something like the future perfect, or I don't know, something, then just, yeah.
What about errors that are due to misunderstanding and misinterpreting the context, for instance? How do you focus that?
Give them time to say, like fluency, but that for me is really important that they can be understood. That's the primary function of a language. So for me, if it's out of context, if it's not used correctly and it doesn't make any sense, then yeah, let them speak and then explain to them why. It can be funny sometimes.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. A pragmatic error. Graham, can you explain that and how to deal with it?
Yeah, but sometimes top of my head, but it's something to use a certain structure that would make sense, or a certain word in this way, or a certain form of a word, and they're just not quite using it right in that context. It's often the problem we have when we teach phrasal verbs and idioms and expressions, that when we only teach the meaning, then they take the meaning and they try to express that meaning in a different way, but it doesn't function like a verb. It's more of a state, or do you know what I mean? So they use it incorrectly, and it just doesn't make sense. And that's one of the biggest. It's very funny for me as well. Do them? They crack me up, but it's important that they don't do them wrong.
Okay, do we have any more comments?
No,
Rob,
I mean,
from
well, lots
teachers?
of the same about, lots of questions that we had were about when to correct, which we've just had a lot. And lots of people saying, yeah, it needs to be a balance, you don't want, it depends on the student. Yeah, that's about it, really.
One last tip from you guys to the teachers about correction. If you were to give one advice, what would that be?
Know the student and the type of activity it is, and then base your type of correction on that. Don't know. There we go.
All right.
I'm out.
Yeah.
And wait, patience. No, I use the patience. Let them speak.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that comes with experience anyway, right? It's one of the hardest things when starting out in teaching, is getting that balance, and it's just with, don't stress, like, you'll get the hang of it.
Ask them the question. Just ask them the question. Look, today, do you want to concentrate on flow, or do you want to concentrate on being perfect? And then take it from there and vary it. Don't control it all the time.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, how you feeling? Do you want to just get some flow going? Okay, let's reduce the error correction.
Perfect. My advice would be to try to analyze as much as possible and then explain the mistakes or the errors, so that just to give the students reassurance, that sense of making the most of their class, they appreciate it really. So if you have to choose between being a stricter or more laid back, I would say be strict.
Be strict.
Don't be afraid.
No, I mean, you can be a laid back teacher, but strict in correction.
Exactly.
That's
That's it.
Yeah.
Both are compatible.
Yeah.
Guys, many thanks. That was great. Many thanks, Graham. Thank you, Rob and Carlos. And we will continue next Friday at 12 sharp. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you later.
Bye.